Welcome to Method and Madness.
This is an ongoing conversation about great books hosted by writers Aaron Gwynn and Brad Kelly.
In each series, we figure out what makes a book like Moby Dick or Blood Meridian worth reading,
and how writers might learn from it in order to master their craft.
We'll also explore the labyrinth that lies beneath the novel,
and find out what it means to our most insightful friends.
You're listening to the first section of a multi-part episode. If you don't want to wait for the whole conversation, head over to Substack or Patreon and subscribe to Method and Madness. You'll get immediate access to our main episodes in a single file, as well as bonus content not available on the free side of the wall. madmethodpod.com.
Today, we've got a very special guest on to talk with us about a very singular novel, and that is William Gibson's 1984 cyberpunk novel. Cyberpunk set the stage for cyberpunk, in fact, in a lot of ways. That book is Neuromancer, and that guest is Ewan Morrison, who is the
Hey, how you doing, Brad?
Hey, good. Thanks for coming on. Good to see you again. We talked over a year ago, maybe closer to 2 years ago, about Andrei Tarkovsky on the Art of Darkness
podcast. Yeah, I probably talked the hind legs off you on that particular subject.
I loved it. Yeah. I loved it. That's when I knew I wanted to talk Neuromancer on this podcast, and you were the first person I thought of to talk Neuromancer. Mr. Morrison is the author of award-winning titles such as Tales from the Mall, Close Your Eyes, How to Survive Everything, and the forthcoming book For Emma, which I think we're going to talk a little bit about, and is pretty relevant to not only Neuromancer, but sort of the world that Neuromancer, I don't know if predicted's quite the right word, but envisioned in some way. So we'll talk a little bit about that. That book is right now, it is available for pre-order from Leamington Books. I think I saw that it was coming out June 17th here in the U.S. and March 25th.
You can get it on Amazon and pre-order as well. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And it's coming in the States in June. I think it's available in pre-order already as well.
It is indeed. Yeah. So definitely people out there, take a look at it. You got there's a very cool trailer that's both, I think, on your website and on the Leamington Books website. Got me pretty pumped to check it out myself.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Ewan has been described by the literary critic Stuart Kelly, and this is a huge compliment, I think, as the most fluent and intelligent writer of his generation here in Scotland. So we are definitely blessed to have him with us. On top of all this, in my opinion, you have risen to the fore as one of the most articulate voices on sort of the collision between AI and the arts. I'm always looking forward to your tweets, and every time I see one that's relevant, every time I see any of them, but anytime they're about AI or something in that vein, I'm sort of nodding my head and retweeting and pumping my fist a little bit. So that's definitely a reason I wanted to talk to you a bit.
It's a bit of a war going on just now, especially in our country. In 2 days' time in the United Kingdom, there's going to be the decision by the government on whether or not they give special permissions to American, Chinese AI companies to keep ripping content for free, you know, all our art, all our music, all our images. I mean, it's really like the British government trying to kiss ass. I mean, who on earth do they think they are? We hardly have an AI industry in this country. We do have a huge art sector though. And so I find it's been quite amazing actually that a lot of the political lines that have been drawn in the last 10 years, you know, between people in different identity groups, whatever, they've all kind of collapsed around the AI issue. So, you know, I find I'm in the same boat with, you know, Christians, communists, trans activists, anyone who's a writer or an artist is like going, whoa, right, you know, or a script writer, you know. My wife's a script writer, and she discovered that 6 of her scripts had already been sucked up into an AI system.
Whoa.
There's a little thing, site you can go to and check it out. It's just transcripts of dialogue, but still, you know, you've not given permission for that to happen. And you don't want to get these things to get so smart that they start to sound like you know?
No.
So, yeah, no, I'm doing my best to be a decelerationist,
I like it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
an extinctionist, as my enemies would call me.
Yeah.
Do
So
you
an
know how that one
extinctionist,
works? Yeah.
what's yeah, I know, tell me about what's an
Okay, an
extinctionist supposed to mean?
extinctionist. It's fascinating. Okay, so the belief of the tech optimists, including the fanboys of Elon Musk, is that we must grow these AIs to the point of super intelligence so that it will give us the technologies that will enable us to colonize the stars, because we only have 2 billion years left until the sun expands and turns into a red giant and
Mm,
eats up Mercury, Venus, and us. So
mm.
therefore, if you stand in the way of the growth of AI superintelligence, then by your actions you're leading to the extinction of us on planet Earth.
Ah,
It's a
right.
complex line of thought, but I have been called an
Yeah.
extinctionist before.
That's yeah. So if you're not excited about a computer ripping off your work,
Mm,
you are cheerleading the extinction of the human race. Got
that's
it.
that's the way it
Yeah.
goes, and it's convoluted, and it's just smacks of cult think.
Yeah, for
Actually,
sure.
it's a bit like Scientologists, trying to weed out all the negative people. What do they call them?
Right.
SPs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Oh, someone's spreading negativity. We have to stop it.
Right,
Um.
right, right. And
So
it turns
yeah,
out the
yeah.
negativity is just valid criticisms,
That's it.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
But
so oh man. So
mm,
your new book for Emma sort of
mm,
plays in this territory. I wouldn't say on the sort of the artist exploitation side from my
no.
understanding. Tell us a little bit about that book and then maybe we'll see if we can find the DNA of Neuromancer in there a little bit.
Oh, I'm sure there's a connection somewhere because I read Neuromancer when I was only 16 and it absolutely blew my brains out.
Yeah.
I'm still picking pieces off my oeuvre. We're going, where
Yeah.
did that come from? Neuromancer. Where did that come? A
Yeah,
friendly,
yeah.
talkative AI. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
That was Neuromancer.
Yeah.
So for Emma, the title comes from um, a folder that is sent out to journalists, to publishers, maybe just like a big mail shot to everybody. But
Mhm.
one editor in England, she receives this thing, and it seems to have come from a person who's known as the San Francisco bomber. And so she worries about this file called For Emma. It's not really anything to do with her. Her name's not Emma. And she finally gets the courage to open it. And inside are a bunch of video recordings that this guy, it turns out he was the San Francisco bomber responsible for many deaths, has been recording these messages to his dead daughter in the last 30 days before he commits his atrocious act by making a bomb and blowing things up. The blowing up of people doesn't go quite according to his plan anyway. But Emma was his daughter, who was a prodigy in Silicon Valley, and she was experimenting with AI and cognitive science and brain chip interface, which
Okay.
is the implantation of advanced technology into the human head. Jeff Bezos is doing it. Um,
Mhm.
Musk, of course, is more famously
Absolutely.
doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and so Emma dies in one of these experiments, and the whole thing's completely hushed up. And
Mhm.
about a month after she dies, her father starts hearing her voice in his head, and she's telling him stuff that she shouldn't know, and she's telling him that she was killed by the experiment, and that he has to find these people to get more information to decode what had happened, and he has to get revenge by blowing up the
Right.
CEO of the big tech biotech company that created the experiment to start with.
Oh,
So that's
I
really
love it.
the framework of the story. A man plagued by this, but it might be a ghost, it might be a hallucination, because believe it or not, 20% of people who lose someone experience audio hallucinations, hear
Yeah.
voices, sense of presence. I know that when my father died, I would have a sense of him around me.
Mhm.
Even one morning, waking up thinking, "Oh my God, he's sitting on my bed."
Right,
It's
right,
just
right.
like so. I was quite moved by the idea of how the dead linger in our minds or in our senses, and I thought it was also a really lovely way for a man who's dealing with regret. He was a divorced man. He didn't see that much of his daughter.
Mm.
His divorce as well was bound up in technology because he'd had an affair on the internet.
Ah, okay,
So
right.
so he's trying to piece together all the moments in his life where he could have saved her as he's building these bombs, which are just pipe bombs to start with, made of fireworks and matchsticks and all the rest of it. He's having these flashbacks and he's telling her, "Hey, do you remember the time we went and had marshmallows under the bridge? And that was when I had to tell you that I was getting divorced from your mom, but you were like over it already,
Mhm.
and like you'd known about it for 3 weeks, and all these intimate little moments." There's one thing I particularly like about the communications with Emma is that as a child, she was super smart and she would always ask why of everything. So we started off like the classic why game for children,
Sure.
which is like you probably done it yourself.
Yeah.
It's time for bed, and your dad's there, or your mom, and you go, "Why do I have to go to bed?" And they go, "Well, because we all have to get some sleep." "Why do we have to get some sleep?"
Right.
"Well,
Right.
because if we don't sleep, then we won't be able to get up for work tomorrow." "Why do you have to
Right.
work?"
Right.
"Well, we have to work so we can put food on the table." "Why do you have to put food on the table?"
Yeah, yeah.
On and on and on it was.
There's
And
a great Louis C.K. bit about that, and he's like, eventually you're just arguing because some things are and other things
yeah,
are not. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Well, unfortunately for Josh, the father, he would find with these big discussions with Emma, which he used to love, but her mother would be like, "No, no, she's just being a brat. Stop it." He would find that they would actually undo his own. He didn't have the answers to many of her questions. As soon as she started getting into the deep ones, like why do we work? Why are we in relationships? Why do we have children? Why are we alive? He had no answers for her at all. And he
right,
felt he'd sort of failed her as a father. And
right.
this why voice continues later on, and it's part of the voice that's in his head um, after she's dead. She's endlessly asking him why, and just plaguing him. Why
Right.
not kill? Why not kill the CEO? Why not kill more people? You know, why are you alive anyway? What have you got left to live for? So yeah, it's this sort of relationship between a father who sort of lost his daughter to death, but also maybe lost her before, and he's trying to pick up the pieces and how he failed her as he's
Mm.
building this bomb to get revenge for her death.
It sounds great. I mean, you're pulling together. I mean, taking the sort of topical stuff, technological
Mm.
stuff, and giving it that real heart that sounds incredibly relatable. I'm really looking forward to this. Yeah, yeah,
Sounds
Cool, cool.
amazing.
You know,
yeah,
I just think like fathers today as well. A lot of us we just don't know what we're doing.
yeah.
That's the thing. It's like there's no guidebook anymore. There's no, like, as I said to someone, like, there's no Dr. Spock or toddler taming manual for nihilist parents. It's like
Right,
what
right,
what are you
right.
going to teach your kid?
Yeah,
Life is essentially meaningless. Make your own meanings. I mean,
yeah.
it's not a good start.
Mm.
Well,
Um,
it's interesting too because I think AI is playing into that in a way because you sort of realize that from the standpoint of 2025, there are no career recommendations you can make
yeah,
for your kid. You can't say, if you have a small child, you can't say, yeah, you should go into fill in the blank because 20 years
it's
from now, who knows what is going to be a viable, economically viable route through life. It's impossible to tell.
It's so true. And in fact, had a discussion with my son recently. He's just been through design school,
Mm.
doing his MA in design, and I was like, and he works as a chef some of the time, and I'm like, design or chef? Chef.
Yeah, now it
People have
seems
got to
like
eat,
chef, right? Yeah,
exactly. Knowing
yeah,
knowing material things, you're not going to be replaced by an AI if you go down that path. So maybe,
yeah.
I mean, maybe that's what we're going to see. We're going to see sort of a split between those sort of jobs in danger that involve these screens we talk into all the time, and the practical blue collar jobs might actually be the survivors,
Yeah.
or like the skill based jobs as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah,
Um,
I think there's some real truth to that. I mean, I think even some of that might end up being replaced too to some degree. It's hard to say, but it seems like a little bit more reliable of a route for
Mm.
sure. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
hey, and I just want to
yeah, go
say,
ahead.
so with Emma and her whys that
Hmm.
aren't answered, it's actually what leads her through her academic career into AI and science because she hopes that the AI is going to give her the answer to the big
Oh,
why. So
right,
the
right, right.
whole thing
And
looks up.
I think there's, I mean, I think there, to give a slight amount, a bit of credit to the sort of tech optimists, I think
Mm,
there are some people who genuinely, I think it's a little bit misguided, but genuinely think that, hey, if we create this AI, then we're going to understand consciousness finally, and we're going to be able to
hmm.
answer these questions we've never been able to answer. I personally don't think that's how it'll
Yeah, no,
work,
I don't
but
think so. I mean, it's really like I mean, I read Mark Andreessen's
yeah, yeah,
what's it called? Tech Optimism Manifesto.
yes,
Um,
yes,
and the one thing came away from that was this is a hammer. It sees everything as nails.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
uh, if you see everything in life as problems that can be solved, I mean, wow, one optimistic way of looking at life. But I don't think human existence works like that. I don't think it's a set of
No,
problems that need to be solved. I don't think. I mean, people talk about consciousness in very like binary terms, in very
mhm,
machine-like metaphors. Oh,
right,
consciousness is just an algorithm, they said for a while. And then because they couldn't prove that, they started saying, well, consciousness doesn't really exist.
right, right.
So
You're right.
I think we have to. It's a hard one to argue with these folks. They're so passionate about their tech worldview, and it would be lovely, I'm sure, to think that everything was everything, from famine to suffering to illness. All these things could just be solved like they were technical problems.
Mhm.
But then at the far end of transhumanism, you have someone like David Pierce. He was one of the founders of what's now called H1 Humanity Plus, which was the
Okay,
Transhumanist
right,
Association. So he
right.
comes up with this idea, um, and it's now what's it called? Anyway, it's an idea that what he'll do is the transhumanists will remove all suffering, not just from human beings, but from the 8 million species on planet
Right.
Earth.
Right.
And they'll do that by rewiring our brains and our bodies and creating updated versions of each species. So we can't cause pain and we can't experience pain. And first of all, I was thinking, well, hold on. I see a lot of people walking around who've just burned themselves that can't feel it.
Right.
They're going to get infections from they're going to lose limbs. Oh, I seem to have just walked into a knife and cut
Right.
my finger off. I didn't feel it.
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
I think you're
Excuse
gonna, I mean, I think you're gonna, if you cut out the ability to suffer, you're gonna cut out the ability to
Sure.
enjoy or whatever you consider the opposite of suffering to be. I think you're
It's
gonna,
such a mechanic. You're right. Such a
yeah,
mechanistic way of doing things as well. And I was just
yeah,
thinking, like, oh, think of those poor lions. Who won't be able to kill and hurt anymore. I guess they'll
yeah.
just have to queue up at like the transhumanist supply center where
Right.
they'll be fed their non-harm surrogate meat. And then I was thinking, hold on,
Right.
there's 8 million species.
Right.
Is he going to do this for all of them? And
Right.
it's just when you go into this, you go, this is absolutely crazy as an idea.
It, it is, and I think I think the real strong proponents of this, because they've maybe had some success in business or in the
Mm,
development of a particular technical solution to something, they
hmm
do kind of tend to think that, well, then you can solve all quote unquote
Yes.
problems with these same approaches. And it's
Yeah.
like life isn't a startup.
No, indeed. Well said.
It's something much more complicated than that, and these approaches, something that works in a spreadsheet doesn't necessarily work for the human. And I think this attitude is part of the reason why they tend to think they can sort of exploit the arts, because it's like, well, if we just get rid of the messy issue of humans being involved, then it's a problem that we'll solve it immediately. We'll write every book imaginable overnight, and that the problem that art's trying to accomplish will be solved. And it's just
Yeah.
it's yeah, it seems
Yeah, I think
incredibly
that's
naive to me. I mean, I tend to see the super pro AI people as
hmm
um precocious children who are
Mm.
ultimately very naive. They may be smarter than you or I IQ wise,
Oh,
but
sure. And at
but
certain tasks, yeah.
right, but ultimately fairly naive and with a kind of childlike
Mm.
perspective on things. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this whole thing that, AI will mean that everybody can be an artist, and it will
Yeah.
take the suffering and the pain and the hardship out of making art, because you can
Right.
just, become a prompt commander, and
Right.
like, it only takes you 2 minutes to write a prompt and you've made 4 images. But
Yeah.
I just think all that thing that they think is suffering and hardship and all the rest of it, that's like where music comes from. It's them playing with the material. It's the accidental riff you heard. It's the little note you played by accident. It's all the discovery and the
Mhm.
hardship of grappling with an art form is kind of the beauty of it. And it's
Right.
the flow state that we go into as well. The whole thing about the flow state, you reach for something that's just beyond your skill level. You
Mhm.
struggle and you struggle and you become so completely absorbed that you completely forget who you are. It's a sort of
Mhm.
blissful state to be
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I
my
mean,
wife.
a
Yeah,
lot of people see that as a sort of a spiritual state, right?
yeah, no,
And
it's
especially in a secular age, it might be one of our best opportunities to have a spiritual experience. Yeah.
no. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, you get people like John Vervaeke who talks about the flow state in spiritual terms, and he says
Hmm.
that's what people are achieving, in worship. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
and in the spiritual life. It's certainly, I know that the flow state when I'm writing, it's the same as when I used to be a painter when I was like 16 or 17.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's such a beautiful place to be. And the idea of having that taken away from you by AI that
Right.
just does it for
Yeah.
you like that,
Well, we have a more economical and
Yeah.
way to do this. It's like, well, that was the point was never to be economical. That was never what we were
Mm,
trying to accomplish. It was never supposed to be
yeah.
efficient,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's galling, if not frightening, for sure. Yeah.
And think of some of the classics in music, like they happen by accident as well.
Hmm.
Like Kashmir by Led Zeppelin.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
amazing riff. It came
Yeah.
from another song, and um, so Jimmy Page just sort of rearranged it, stuck it on a loop in his head, kept playing it, and this
Yeah.
whole new song came from it by accident.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Is this a song or is this just like 3 second riff? I have no idea." And
Right.
then
Right.
the rest
Right.
of the band were like, "That's extraordinary.
Right.
Let's work it." So these moments of creative discovery like that as well, they come from these immersive states that artists get into,
Hmm.
where intuition is doing all the work for you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Neuromancer. And
Mm,
all this is kind of relevant because I think Neuromancer was one of the earliest books that gave us one of the grandest visions of what a super intelligent AI would be. And
mm.
it was about more than and there was almost this nod in there because there's the character Dixie Flatline
Hmm.
who is
Yeah.
a construct and points out
Mm,
I have limitations. I can only basically say what this guy
yeah.
what this system thinks that this guy would have said in real life. But then there's the actual super intelligent AIs. There's technically two of them trying to
Yeah.
merge Wintermute and
Wintermute,
Neuromancer.
Neuromancer. Yeah.
And how do you think I don't like treating prescience as the sort of mainline marker of how good work of science fiction is, but how do you see that Neuromancer is prescient in some ways? Did he miss the mark if he's trying to predict the future? How do you see? I mean, it's 1984. At
I would
that
like
time, nobody was on the internet, you know?
we could run and run on this one because there's a few
Yeah,
angles in this one. Hold on.
yeah.
So ask me about hyperstition in a few minutes.
Okay,
There's like
yeah,
there's
yeah.
this whole thing with um so no, I think it's extraordinarily prescient. I think that what happened with Neuromancer was that because it was so hard to develop and turn into a movie
Hmm.
back in the 80s and 90s, was that a bunch of ideas that were inspired by Neuromancer then came along, like The Matrix, and it
Hmm.
sucked up a huge amount of of the narrative and maybe even the style of
Mhm.
Neuromancer as well. Um, so by the time we come back to Neuromancer being made by Apple TV right now
Right.
as a TV series, they've got an interesting problem in as much as all the prescience that was in Neuromancer was kind of done in the Matrix. So
Hmm.
it might look like this amazing, this prophetic novel that foresaw the rise of AI and of even like grief bots, or or like Dixie Flatlines, like a grief bot. It's basically everything from one person's life loaded into one limited AI, and it can't expand beyond the life that it had. Um,
Yeah.
so all these unique phenomena that were invented by Gibson, we've kind of already seen in all of the different stories that he inspired. I mean, there's so many.
Oh
The
yeah.
whole cyberpunk genre just exploded from that.
Hmm.
So it's going to be really difficult for them to make this TV series.
Yeah. Do you,
Uh
right? Do you creatively, do you just try to, we're just going to try to adapt it as faithful as we can and let the chips fall where they may? Or do we
yeah,
try to update it and take that same sort of forward-looking perspective from 2025 forward, right?
or like do you do retrofuturism? So you go
Right.
back to try to recreate that 80s vision of the future. So
Hmm.
that would be a bit like what's his name did with Tales from the Loop. So you have like a
Yeah.
backward, you go back in time to a different vision of what the future could have been.
Right.
I think
I
I'd go for that one, actually.
I think so too. That's kind of what
Retrofuturism.
The Severance TV show is doing now. There's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
80s cars and the computers are all big and chunky and have a cool aesthetic, but
yes.
it's the primary tech that is the conceit of the show is super futuristic. So I
Oh, I love that
yeah.
show. It's
Yeah, yeah. I
so
think there is
it's
something cool about the times we're living in. There is something cool about like this mishmash because that is sort of what things feel like, you know? Like I'm talking to you on this, but I bought a keyboard that feels more like a
mm,
typewriter, but it plugs in via USB, right? So there is this way in which I think we are kind of mashing up old and new even in our lives to a certain degree.
yeah, no, it's also remarkable how the two worlds created by Neuromancer and by Blade Runner are kind of similar because they
Hmm.
show well, I mean, that's the cyberpunk aesthetic. They show ruin and corruption and addiction and mess and garbage mixed in with
Uh,
the real high-tech stuff that's just way beyond, and the high-tech stuff that's got a market value. And in both of those stories, Blade Runner and Neuromancer, you have people talking about their implants, and like, oh, how much did that cost? It's like, oh,
right.
I can't afford like a real pet. I'll just get
Right.
this synthetic snake. And in
Mhm.
Neuromancer, there's lots. Molly talks about her glasses that are implants in her head. There's
Yeah.
a lot of sort
Yeah.
of debate as to whether or not she should get like upgrades, or has she got the best kind, and
Right.
all this kind of stuff. I find that fascinating, that conjunction of super high tech with a really kind of broken down culture all around you.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it is so today. I mean, what's the image of 2025? It's potholes and overflowing trash cans with a CCTV camera above it.
Right, right,
The very
right.
latest facial recognition CCTV camera with nobody
Yeah.
actually observing on the other end. just
Right,
just an
right.
AI scanning faces. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it was prescient, and it was saying, the sci-fi future might not be, it's not going to be Star Trek,
No.
it's not going to be like
Yeah.
everything's super clean.
That's
It's um
I like the posing the Star Trek versus almost as
mm,
opposite ends of the pole. Star Trek
mm,
versus Neuromancer slash Blade Runner. The
mm,
movie, the Ridley Scott film, even more so than the book that
mm.
inspired it. As these kind of two poles. Star Trek, it's sort of like, well, we'll just all have sort of some kind of vague luxury
Yeah.
egalitarianism that everybody
Yes.
lives in.
Yeah, yeah.
And this other, this other realm where well, maybe all this technology is really just an effort for an increasingly small group of people to accrue increasingly large amounts of money,
Yeah.
power, and influence, right? Which we see with
Yeah.
the Tesher
Mm,
Ashpool family. They're
mm,
literally
mm, mm.
cryogenically freezing themselves and
Yeah.
periodically coming back to life just so the dynasty never ends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm.
and that seems more realistic to me. That
Yeah.
you'll just end up with a more
a more striated society rather than all of us sort of living. And you talk about this in your article,
Mm.
your conversation with Irvin Welsh and
Even
Huck
Welsh,
Mag,
yeah.
and your article in Psychology Today about the sort of growing underclass. It's like, all right, we'll have all this technological advancement. It'll be able to do all these amazing things. But it'll also mean that most of you guys don't have a role in the
Yeah.
economy,
Well, I mean,
right?
yeah, that came from Noah Yuval Harari, a series of talks that he did after his uh, book about, the future of humankind in the
Mhm.
age of technology. Um,
Yeah,
and so it was just this prediction that there would be useless class who have to be kept alive and kept from rioting and hurting everyone else by drugs and games and
right,
universal basic income. So you get your digital money, you're told what you can spend it on, but here's like a top up of
hmm,
barbiturates from the government and games to keep you
right,
busy. It's just
right.
extraordinary dystopian picture
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
of the future, and really one that ties into the whole Blade Runner Neuromancer world as well. I
Hmm.
mean, the useless underclass, all that filth, they're not contributing to society anymore. They're just being kept going and kept pacified. Um,
Right.
it's a truly horrific vision of the future, but we can see elements of it around us and growing. I mean, I think what's happened. I was having a discussion with Johannes Niederhausen, and something became really clear to me is that there's two visions of the technological future that are developing. So there's, if you like, I don't know if you know, but the social credit system experiments in China. So there's these 6 cities where they're doing these experiments in having a social credit rating system where everyone rates everyone else and all your behaviors are monitored, and you get
Right.
points for being a good citizen and points docked, taken off for being a bad citizen, an untidy citizen, or jaywalking, whatever. And
Yeah.
people's freedoms are limited if their social credit system goes down too low. In fact, your face will even appear on a screen in the main street that says,
Yeah. Yeah.
Brad has been a bad boy. We have docked 500 points from today. And you won't be able
Right.
to travel, and you won't be able
Right.
to leave the country, and your kids won't be able to go to good schools and all this kind of stuff. So that's the sort of Chinese experiment, and
Hmm.
we're seeing part of that going on in Europe. Certainly, that's there's much talk about that being something that the UK wants to head into. So it's like the technological control state. Yeah.
Hmm.
And on the other hand, you've got yo gung ho American accelerationism, which
Yeah.
is much more, the feudal cyberpunk overlords, who are going to be getting their cryogenically frozen girlfriends fitted with glasses that
Mirror.
actually fit into their skulls,
Yeah.
who are shooting nanobots into their bloodstream so they can live 300 years.
Right.
And beneath them, you'll have the useless class of people fighting over scraps. So there's
Right.
two very, very different visions. Um, it's not Star Trek versus Neuromancer. It's probably closer to a fusion of 1984 and Brave New World would be the
Mm-hmm.
Chinese social credit system, versus full on Neuromancer slash Blade Runner.
Right.
And
Right. Oh.
unfortunately, both of these features are like tech horror,
Right.
and so
Right.
and so
Right.
we're just stuck in the middle just now.
Yeah.
You and
Yeah.
I was thinking about something that Gibson says in his foreword to the edition I have. He wrote it in 2004, and he was looking back on, you know, how
Mm.
prescient the book was, and he said that the moments that shone for him were those where he relied on his imagination
Mm,
about where
mhm,
technology would go, and
mm,
the moments that for him were kind of cringe were where he tried to do actual research to predict where technology goes. I just thought that was
mhm.
fascinating, and wondering if you have thoughts about that.
Um, I think the moments in Neuromancer where we get plugged in and we're in Case's mind
Hmm.
as he goes into the AI systems, those are extraordinary. Sometimes you've got to go back a page and you go, whoa, hold on. He just
Hmm.
walked through what? He just broke through the ice of the firewall.
Yeah.
It's like, where are we? What space are we in? It's absolutely trippy and incredible.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't think it translates literally into descriptions of places and actual technologies. But I think that's what the kind of euphoria of reading it is.
Mm.
But I think, you know, it's unfortunate to hear that he thinks any parts of it are cringe at all. Probably the only part of it that's slightly cringe for me is the same thing that's slightly cringe about Blade Runner, which is in the studio cut. You've got the voiceover. You know,
Right.
well, I was just walking down the noodle bar, and
Right.
I'm a Blade Runner. We have blades and we run. You know,
Right.
dreadful explanatory voiceover, based on sort of 1950s noir detective
Absolutely.
thing. Yeah, and I think that's probably the only thing that holds back Neuromancer, or it makes it particularly flavorsome, is you've definitely got that with Case. You've definitely got this 50s film noir. You know, the addict on the dirty streets. It was just one more story I had to get through that day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I prefer it when it gets a little bit more William S. Burroughs than Dashiell Hammett, I suppose.
Yeah,
know,
no,
it's
he's
a little bit
definitely got
more.
Darshall.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
no, I think that's a really good comparison. I think when he takes a tab as a writer and goes flying off into these super imaginative states, it's extraordinarily thrilling. You just can't stop reading. And wow, you know, if that's what the AI future is when you're plugged into a super intelligence, it's going to be great. You'll probably forget. Gonna forget to feed yourself. You'll probably be standing there with a headset on in your own human waste as you starve because you're so exhilarated by the experience. But no, it's an extraordinary work of imagination.
Yeah, and his idea or his notion that where he relied on his imagination, he ended up being more prescient about the way the technology kind of unfolded. Whereas where he, talked to computer scientists and futurists, that's where things broke down in terms of the novel's predictive ability.
You know, it's a funny thing. I don't like talking about sort of, the spiritual and the universal consciousness and all that kind of stuff. But there are definitely moments in writing where if you plug into something, the writing takes care of itself. And that's usually when the imagination kicks in and you're like, okay, I'm just going to sit here and take notes and like transcribe what the ideas want because they're speaking among themselves. I had some sci-fi future moments like that when I was writing for Emma. It was just, it was descriptions of experiments that had gone wrong with nanobots that were injected into bloodstreams. And just seeing these little gold particles shooting through the veins and then erupting out through bodies. And it like scared the living bejesus out of me. And I don't know if that's predictive, but it just demanded that it happen. You start at the top of the page and they inject these things into someone's bloodstream. 2 weeks later, they're monitoring everything in their body. And 3 weeks later, they've multiplied so much that they need to escape from the body and they take the organs out as they go, not to give too much the story away. That doesn't happen to Emma, by the way.
I mean, three novelists sitting here talking about these things. I have found when I make the mistake of revisiting my own work, the moments that I'm more interested in, and I guess I feel prouder of, are the moments where I don't really know where I came up with the thing, where the thing isn't overdetermined, where I can't remember planning it out, and the and the moments that I'm like, ugh, or I'm just not as interested in, are the ones where I'm like, oh yeah, I started with this idea and I wanted to hit this beat and this beat and this beat. It's just fascinating to me when you were talking about, the spiritual or quasi-spiritual experience of being a writer and plugging into that thing, whatever it happens to be. It just in my own work, that's the moments I feel least responsible for are the moments that I'm more interested in.
So true. It's absolutely so true. There's a passage in the novel that I was like, okay, he's going to go and test his first pipe bomb,
Mhm.
and he's got to find somewhere really remote. Okay, I'll do a little bit of research. Okay, it's foggy around the beaches of San Francisco.
Mhm.
Next thing I know, all this writing comes out about trying to find a place on a foggy beach where you can't tell where the horizon is.
Mhm.
And then this idea of
Mm.
having a bomb in a place that's suddenly silent all around you
Mm.
because the fog's just come in. And it's the most amazing piece of writing. And I do not think I wrote it. I think,
Right.
Right.
I think the scene wrote itself, and I just had to pay attention to what was happening once I started seeing the image in my head.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, it's
and
those moments
I
those moments
just
make all this suffering worth it.
It's it exactly, and exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't think with all this stuff about AI, we'll be able to write novels soon.
Mhm.
I don't think it's going to get to the point where those things happen because
Right.
Mm.
it'll be spreadsheet writing,
Mhm.
Right.
and what you're saying is, we can plan novels. In fact,
Mhm.
over there on that wall,
Mhm.
I have a board with the 40 chapter
Of
Oh
course.
yeah, I got one over here too.
structure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic structure. Robert Louis Stevenson used it all the time.
Right.
Mm.
And but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but just don't do all your work on the board. It's like
Mhm.
you have to just increasingly, my 40 beat board for a story, it's just one line on a post-it note on each
Right.
block, because I have to leave all the rest to happenstance and imagination,
Yeah.
and I'm
Those are just giving you
yeah,
spaces to dream in, right?
that's it.
Just a little bit of a boundary in which I can make the thing happen. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It gives you permission, to spend that day going, okay, well, today's the day where he tests his first bomb,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
okay, let's go for a walk with that, and you have to get into the flow state to do that well. Otherwise, if you just tick boxes and you go done that, done that, done that, then the writing is dead,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
and
and
it just reads like a spreadsheet.
I think this is what the AI developers of, we're going to write books with AI, they don't
Yeah.
quite understand. And I think that those experiences that you have as a writer do translate into the work and then translate into the reader's experience. I think AI is going to be able to write a great sentence, no
Yes.
problem.
Right.
But the overall thing is gonna be missing, and I think people will be looking for stuff.
Yeah.
Eventually, people are going to be looking for stuff written by people who actually sat down and wrote it.
The,
So
the weird thing to me is that as we're talking about the parts of this conversation that are about the craft of writing and what we have to do, clearly the thing that is burning brightest for all three of us is this moment where we feel least responsible for the work we've produced.
Yeah.
And it's also the most difficult thing to talk about, to find a vocabulary for. And it does seem to be extra rational or hyper rational. And that is, seems to me, I know nothing about computers or AI, but
Mm,
it
mm,
seems like
mm.
AI would have the most difficulty
Sure.
producing a kind of extra rational, hyper rational, um, register in writing.
mhm. Yeah,
Well, I mean, it's a
100%.
bit like talking about like why a song is really good.
Right.
Hmm.
Who wants to hear someone going on about why they love,
That's right.
you know, Kashmir by Led Zeppelin, or who wants to even hear like how it was done, or, you know, it's I'd rather just listen to it. And
Yeah.
it's the
That's
same
right.
with love. I mean,
Mhm.
who'd want to who wants to be with a partner and goes, I love you for X, Y, Z, reasons
Right.
plus A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you're like,
Yeah.
Jesus, what is
Right.
this? LinkedIn CV?
That's
Just
right.
love
Right.
me for
Right.
God's sake,
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that just intuitive thing, and hopefully
Yeah.
that's what we can keep alive in fiction as the technologists decide that fiction's just another bunch of problems on a spreadsheet that need solving.
Mm. Yeah.
It seems like
Amen.
in Neuromancer, Case is more successful in his quest, in his mission, and when he's able to tap into whatever that intuition is.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
It's a weird kind of commentary by Gibson.
Yeah. Well, and also I know he's the anger too, right? There's a movement in the novel that takes up a good chunk where becomes angry and he's sort of trying to maintain that anger. And I saw that as like the uncontrolled humanity of him, right? The part that can't be
Yeah.
replicated, the part that doesn't come
Right.
across in a construct that Wintermute maybe doesn't quite understand. And there's something ferocious about it that can actually, anger is there for a reason.
Mm.
It's
Right.
it's not good to be angry at people most of the time, but when you need it, you want to be able to be angry, right?
Right.
So
Well,
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
there's a movement throughout the book towards just William Gibson's own intuition and
Mhm.
own. Oh, he just gets more immersed in the book as he's writing it,
Yeah,
and he gets
yeah,
more and more trippy,
yeah, it
and
does.
kind of more incredible. And
Yeah,
Case has to follow that trajectory as well.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
And
yeah.
Gibson, as an accelerant, you have one of my novelist buddies calls the ticking time bomb
Hmm.
kind of energy.
mm,
You have the poison and the blood,
yeah,
Hmm.
right? And so that is pushing the throttle for the
Hmm.
narrative
mm,
at various points. But then within that context and using that booster, you're able to find all these weird, irrational, imaginative spaces.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah. I
absolutely.
mean, sometimes you just have to provide like a ticking clock like that, and it's a literary device, but
Hmm.
it's there just to give you the freedom to explore
Yeah,
places
Right.
and
give,
states. And
gives-
yeah, you
yeah,
just have to keep doing the little thing of reminding the audience the clock's still ticking, but
right.
you're only doing it to buy yourself more time, really, as a writer.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, get
Yeah.
right to make it a bit more compelling. Yeah. Well, Ewan, this has been fantastic. I so much appreciate your time and getting your thoughts on not only Neuromancer, but it's also just good to talk to somebody who feels the same way about AI as I do, more or less,
Same.
Good, good.
Same. Yeah.
I scroll Twitter and sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind because I'm like, how can you guys think this is a good idea? But
Yeah. Have you been trolled yet? Have you been hunted down by the tech optimists?
No,
That was
not quite so
yeah.
much, but I've been in
That's
some
it.
arguments for sure. Yeah.
That's a real experience, that one. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 Because they
Yeah.
do think that you're. So I've got 1 minute for just one thing. So
Sure. Yeah,
you
please.
asked earlier on about the influence of William Gibson. So there's this belief in, or like how prescient he was.
Mhm.
So there's this fascinating phenomena within the transhumanist and tech optimist mindset, this belief in hyperstition. So it's the
Yes.
belief that, because you believe in a fiction, if enough people believe in it, your tech fiction,
Mhm.
say it's the AI superintelligence or colonizing the moon, enough people believe in it with enough passion and invest enough in it, then it will happen. So you can turn
Right.
fictions into reality. And actually,
Yeah.
what happened was a lot of people who work in tech read Neuromancer.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So some of William Gibson's actually partially responsible for some of the tech dystopia that we live in just now.
Right. 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 Well, yeah, not only the ideas, but also he kind of made it cool, right? I
Yes,
imagine he
indeed.
made it cool to work in computers and think, and that probably
Yeah,
drew some people into it who may not have otherwise gotten involved, right? So
for
certainly he's
sure. It's
sort
so
of
much
shaped
cooler.
the direction of it.
So
Yeah.
much cooler than Star Trek, and even Star
Yeah.
Trek, influenced the invention of the Motorola flip phone.
Right. 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 Yeah. Well, right now, Palmer Luckey, I don't know if you guys know that, the guy who invented the Oculus VR, he has now
Mm.
started a defense contractor company it's basically military grade weaponry, etc., with a focus on autonomy. He said in a recent interview, he said, "Yeah, science fiction's a great place to go and look for ideas." It's
Amazing,
like
amazing.
so
You've got those
so
robotic dogs that kill in
yeah,
Fahrenheit 451 as well.
right?
Oh,
And those are real
oh.
Now I
now.
do have to go.
Yes, yes. Thank you so
Thank you
much,
so
Ewan.
much.
All right,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
Thank you.
Real
Great chat.
pleasure.
You're listening to the first section of a multi-part episode. If you don't want to wait for the whole conversation, head over to Substack or Patreon and subscribe to Method and Madness. You'll get immediate access to our main episodes in a single file, as well as bonus content not available on the free side of the wall, madmethodpod.com.